on our team missing today. Kirsten Thompson's not with us, and Brandy Mockfield was unable to. And I think Mr. Burnside may have a time commitment. 5:50?
5:45.
5:45.
All right, thank you. Nobody else on the management side has time constraint other than Mr. Burnside? Okay, Kurt?
And we are missing Joe Castellano and no time constraints.
Okay, great, thank you. And next on the agenda is to accept the minutes from the last time. Anybody have any problems with minutes, any concerns, questions, deletions, additions? Any minutes from last time? We had a pretty short session last time. All right, can I see thumbs for the minutes? Approve the minutes, please. Perfect. And with that, again, the presentation. All right, we talked last time that,
I think Mr. Daly had, before we get into Amy's presentation, did you want, you said there was something you wanted to, no? Or did, okay, my bad, I misunderstood you, I'm sorry.
okay, all right. Amy, we talked last time about Amy doing a budget presentation this session. Just keep an open mind. Remember our commitments that we made at the beginning. Amy, do you want people to wait for questions, or do you mind if they ask a question if something comes up?
I don't mind to ask a question while we go along.
Okay, great. Okay, just raise your hand and Amy or I will call on you, and Amy French or I will call on you. And then we can, if nobody else has anything, let's get right to it.
May I project, please?
Yes, I'll give it done.
Okay, all right, thank you, everyone. As Donna said, please feel free to ask any questions as we go along. This really is a conversation, so I'd like it to be like that as we go through. Our intent today was to share more information about the budget and have it to be more of a conversation that leads us to our next steps as far as salary or compensation, negotiation, and all of that is concerned. We started this conversation at the big training for interest-based bargaining and said that it was going to be hopefully a good method for us to be able to have a discussion related to all of our numbers before we got into compensation bargaining. So I hope that this is really good information, and then I look forward to hearing what other information you may want or need as we go along. So I just wanted to start out with talking about some of the basics of the budget. The school district's budget is made up really of 6 different parts or funds to it. Every fund is segregated for its specific purpose, has specific revenues and expenditures that come out of it, and really are designated for specific purposes that we have to stick to in each individual fund. 6 different ones. The first one is the general fund. That's the main due, right? That's the one that is structured for most of the expenditures and revenues that we get in for educating our students and for the operating expenses of the district. So it's the main fund when you're talking about actually supporting compensation benefits of our people. Not the only one, but the main one. The second fund is debt service, and this is specifically for payment of debt that the district has. So think of it as equivalent to kind of like the mortgages that the district has in terms of the money that we borrow to build schools and other things. This debt service fund pays for the debt related to all of that payment, principal of interest, and that really is the only thing it does. There's the capital fund, and those capital funds are used to build schools, secure our buildings, so safety and security measures, all of the maintenance related to all of our buildings and all around the district. That's what the capital fund is for, specifically for those purposes. The food service fund then supports all of our breakfast and lunch service program across the district. As well as other after-school and summer school meal type things. So food service is specifically for that. It does support salaries, but only salaries related to those people who work in the food services industry specifically. Special revenue funds also is you can also call that the grants fund. So special revenue is where all of our grants for in federal purposes come in, and then there are many different types of federal grants, and all of them are designated for specific purposes. But some major examples of that, and I'm sure ones that all of you have heard of and worked with, are things like IDEA or Title I or Title II. Many other federal funding grants and sources, but all of them are accounted for in the special revenue fund. And then lastly, there's the internal service fund, and the internal service fund specifically accounts for the insurance costs of the district. And when I say insurance, that means health insurance, but it also means property and casualty. So all of our property insurances, cybersecurity insurance, there's a laundry list of insurances that the district carries, and all of those are accounted for within the internal service fund. So those are the six. So, and the six make up the $2.9 billion budget total that you probably hear about or have seen. And so you see in this pie graph here, you see how the different funds break down into the different parts and pieces. The general fund is this big orange slice right here. That is the largest part of the budget. And then the capital fund is this big blue slice right here. That's the other second largest part. And then the other funds follow line as you see here. So where the dollars come from? So this is all of the dollars across all of the budget that you see in this bar graph, where all of our funds come from. The smallest portion of them coming from the federal source, which is this smaller bar. And then next state sources, and then next local sources. So the local sources, as you can see, are the largest part of the budget, and that's one of the things that sometimes when people see, they get a little surprised by. They're unaware. They think that we get all of this money from the state, but really the bulk of the revenue that we receive and utilize in the district for the budget come from local sources, mainly property tax, but then other local type sources as well. Just a couple of stats about the district as well, because people sometimes don't realize until they sit back and take a look at how big we've actually gotten. So 109,000 students approximately across the district, and that does include all of our charter school students and now family empowerment scholarship students, or that is voucher students from the state level, so that includes all of them. 12,000 plus employees and 116 schools. So we are, in fact, the 27th largest school district in the United States. So it's a large population. And just to know the enrollment by grade level, so when we were talking about those, 100,000 students, kind of where they lie and how they come to us. So here are all the enrollments by grade. That lead us to those numbers, and so just a really large operation around the district, and it's just good to know the scope by which we all operate within this district. And then one of the things that I think is very unique about us, and this graph will show it, is and this is only a 10-year enrollment history, but this trend goes on about double that amount of time. So in this 10-year enrollment history, you see from 2015 to 2016, there's a constant line up as far as our enrollment is concerned, right? This enrollment now at 89,164. This enrollment really is our what we call COFTE or capital outlay FTE are traditional school students. Those students are here. It doesn't include charter school students. It doesn't include voucher students. These are students that we house every day and educate every day in our traditional schools. So this trend, as you see over the past 10 years, has gone up consistently. And down here you see what the numbers are for the growth, right? So 1,500 students a year, 1,700 students a year, at least 1,000 students every year, almost without fail. With the exception of this one dip in 2020-21, and we all know that the world kind of went topsy-turvy that year, right? But other than that, we have seen a consistent trend in growth, and that trend that you see really is equivalent to more than a school year, right? The average elementary holds about 1,000 students, right, on the prototype. The average middle school is 1,200 to 1,300 kids, and the average high school is going to be close to 2,000. So these numbers of growth are more than a school year that the school district has, that our school district has seen, and we are really quite unique in that around the state. Most districts do not grow at the rate that we've grown over this extended period of time. And I'm only showing 10 here, but it goes back more than that. So a really good thing for us in terms of the opportunity that it presents us to share all the good things we have in our district with more students, but it also presents very unique challenges as well in terms of being able to house all the students at a rapid rate and being able to keep up as far as resource with all of those things that our district would need in that growth pattern for such a long period of time. So just something I think that is very interesting and unique about the Lee County School District. So now let's talk specifically general revenue. As I said, that's the big one, right? So that's the bulk of the budget, and that's the big fund that supports most of the operating expenses within the school district day to day, right? So this is just a breakdown specifically of general fund revenue sources. And again, the trend is still the same. This large piece, this blue piece, is local sources. So 63% of our general fund revenue comes from local sources, and then there's 37% that comes from state. Just kind of how we had talked about before. These local sources mostly being property tax, but there's some other things that come into play there as well. So that's just a picture of. And then these are pictures of really how these revenues that we're talking about here, how are they appropriated in the budget here? So we have a couple of different looks. We have appropriations by category here. So the biggest part here, the 67% piece, that's this big orange piece, is salary and benefits, right? So our school district, and really any school district, is a very people-intensive business. The cost of people is going to be the biggest thing you have in your budget. And so this orange part represents the cost of salaries and benefits, and then these other parts and pieces are other things, as denoted down here, such as purchase services or energy, meeting utility costs, supplies, capital outlay, other things. And then over here is an appropriation by function, or that is the type of expenditure. So here, in the big orange piece, 64% is all of our instructional expenditures. So anything that's categorized as an instructional expenditure would be here. And as you would imagine, in an instructional institution, that is the biggest portion of the budget. And then here's all the other categories we have below: instructional support or administrative, which is the small sliver right here, maintenance, and other areas. So these are just two main ways in which we will break down how we expend funds, both for the state, because they ask for it and we must report on it, and for ourselves as we're reporting to the community when they want to know, so how do you spend the money that you get, basically. So by category, or sometimes object, as you'll hear us say, and then here by function. So let's talk about the Florida Education Finance Program, or the FEFP, as you may have heard it referred to. So the FEFP is the major funding source, and I'm going to dip into a document here for us to look at. So the FEFP is the Florida Education Finance Program, or that is the major funding mechanism that the state has for all school districts across the state. So this is a breakdown basically of how the state calculates the FEFP specifically for us, but every school district's calculation works the same. The two columns that you see here is last year, that is 2024, and then this year, 2025, and then the difference between the two, right? And so there's different categories within the FEFP. The major thing that they will do is based on the number of FTE that we have or that they project for us, they'll give us a certain amount of money per that FTE or the weighted FTE, and that is the base student allocation that you may have heard of. And then after they give us our base funding based on that base student allocation, there's other pieces of funding that we get as well, in different parts and pieces, and sometimes specifically connected to certain things. Like they give us a safe school allocation, and with the safe school allocation, we have to spend it on specific safety, security initiatives across the district, so on and so forth, right? And so there are different categories throughout the FEFP that they give us money in, right, which will total a certain total. And for us, this year, that total funding for the Lee County School District, based on their formula, which is all calculated here, is about $993.9 million. So that's the FEFP calculation. Now, remember, this is the total for all students, so that includes that, this money includes money that we would give to charters because it's charter school FTE that's generating that, so we would give their portion to them. It's also money that would go to FES students or state voucher students that go to private school. And this year, that's estimated for us at this number here, $63.3 million. So that would be, but all of this is our total funding. And then down here, you see how that funding breaks down both per FTE and by what sources. Part of this money is coming from local source, 58.5%, and part of it is coming from state source, 41.5%. So the state gives us some of this money, and then the rest of the money really is generated through the property tax levy that the district does locally. So that's how the FEFP works in terms of how the state appropriates and gives our district and district money. So we kind of covered these things in terms of, how much our total allocation was from the state, that most of that is state dollars. For us this year, it's calculated to or equivalent to about $9,241 per FTE. So this is a calculation of some of the different districts across the state and what their funds per FTE is equivalent to for them in the same FEFP calculation. The way that the calculation works, not every district gets the same amount of money. It's not like everybody gets $9,241 per FTE across the state. Depending on what the calculation is, what students you have, what type of students you have, and how the rest of the funds in the calculation are working, it could be very different for different counties. So here's Lee, as we said, at $9,241 per FTE. But then you see some others that are different. Palm Beach, for example, is $9,513 per FTE. So they get $272 more per FTE than Lee County does because of just how the calculation works. Then there's other locations that get less than. So say, for example, Dade gets about $75 per FTE less than we do. Broward, $311 less than we do. So this is just a comparison of different districts for you to see the differences. But then we also noted our Southwest Florida region as well, just so there's something that you can compare to. So Charlotte County, for example, gets $250 approximately per FTE more funds than Lee County does. Collier gets about $1,600 per FTE more than Lee County does, based on how the calculation works. And Glades County receives $633 per FTE more than Lee County does. So all of these things weigh into when we make comparisons to different counties and what they're doing and how they're doing it, we have to understand how the funding mechanisms may differ as well. And I saw a question. Anna, was that your hand up? Okay. Oh, sorry, Donna, was I supposed to wait for you?
That's all right.
Okay.
You can see them, I keep turning around.
Okay.
Might miss a hand.
Okay.
So my question is, if our funding is coming from different sources, such as local, state, and federal, looking at the difference of Charlotte County and Collier County, is that contributed to them having the millage different than us?
No, their millage difference from us would be, and just for everybody's, information, I think you're referring to the millage difference because those counties levy an additional millage
Yes.
in order to raise additional funds. That additional millage is outside of even this number. That additional millage is gonna add to it. This number that you're seeing here is specifically what they generate through the state's calculation of the FEFP, which does not count for the additional millage that they may levy. So that number would be even on top of this one.
Okay.
Okay? Kevin, you have a question? Okay.
So kind of thinking about these different amounts and knowing that each district can kind of set its own local property tax rate, correct?
Well,
Within a range, right?
not, there are limitations to
Right.
that. And
So-
so there's statutory limitation as to the millage that a school district can levy, and the state, through their FEFP calculation, does calculate a required, what they call a required local effort, or that is a minimum amount. So there's a minimum amount, millage levy, that every district must levy that they calculate. You gotta levy that in order to get the other state money that they ask. And then if you're gonna do more than that, there is a statutory limitation as to how and when you can do that.
So, all right, so, because it's all like value times percentage, right? Because it's property value times the millage rate. So, so the difference, and maybe you're gonna ask the same question that I'm asking now. So the difference, does everybody do the RLE or does everybody do something different, right? Because if it's everybody does the RLE, the Collier County makes sense because their property value might be worth more, right? So 5% of 100 million is worth 5%, is more than 5% of 10 million, right? So is everybody pretty much the RLE, or these counties that collect more have the difference here? Do they have different village levels than the RLE?
Well, everybody's the RLE, but the RLE, or the required local effort, is different for everybody. So our millage rate, whatever that is not the same millage rate, required local effort that gets attached to every single district. Your required local effort is, or your millage rate, your minimum millage rate is calculated by the state through the FEFP. And to my knowledge, everybody levies that. Everybody levies at least that. If they didn't, they couldn't get state funds.
So essentially the state's telling you, you gotta come up with 100 million on your own, and then we'll give you some money. This is what should get you 100 million, and they do that? I'm trying to figure out the difference here. So like, I know there's a required local effort, but like, we're doing the required local effort, but is Collier only doing the required local effort? And they're just pulling in more because their property values are more?
Yeah, well, yes, yes, yes. So if you're asking, so what really is driving this difference, right? What really is driving the $1,600 difference? Right, if you have a mix of a pretty high property value, a tax rate, and then you have less students in which to divide that revenue, because they don't have as many students as we do, then your revenue per FTE is more, right? And so it gives you a greater, I'll call it economy of scale, or greater buying power. So if you're asking, is a property value something that could drive a difference or could help a district? In some respects, yes, right? But also I will say that in the calculation of the FEFP, as typically as property values go up, you don't get the total benefit of that, right? Like if we had one tax rate, if our tax rate was $5 per 1,000 this year, and next year we got to keep that same $5 per 1,000, and our tax roll went up 10%, then mathematically we'd see that same increase in revenue because we were able to keep that same tax rate. But that's not the way the calculation works. Typically, as your roll goes up, then you'll see that they'll push that rate down because they artificially also try to drive tax rates a little bit lower than maybe they necessarily have to be. I'm trying to word that right. So it works kind of both ways, I guess. I'm getting a little bit into the weeds as far as how the calculation works. But yes, a district could see some benefit of a higher tax rate, but number two, it's not as large a benefit as it might be if tax rates weren't driven down sometimes artificially. Sarah.
Thank you. I just want to provide some context to Mr. Daly's question. So for example, Collier County's taxable base is over $171 billion compared to Lee, which is over $160 billion. So it is like Amy was saying, that economies of scale, they have, less than half the students divided by that $171 billion, whereas, we have upwards of 100-some thousand students being divided by our $160 billion. So I just wanted to provide that number for some context.
Absolutely, thank you so much. Okay, did I hit all the questions? Okay, all right, I'm gonna keep rolling then. So, all right, so let's talk then about what that means in terms of investments in instructional salaries. And this chart that you see over on this right-hand side is specifically the school district of Lee County. This yellow line is the average salary over the years from FY20 to FY25. What our average salaries are across the district, and this orange line on the bottom is what the beginning teacher salaries are. So of course you see the big jump here in the year was the first year of the teacher salary increase allocation, and then we've increased a little bit in each year since then, and then you see also what's happened to the average salary, which is every teacher, every instructional person's salary on the average. And then this table on the left just compares that same information for other districts as well. So you see how we compare to the other districts at this time. Of course, that was the information that we gathered at this time. So if anybody has done any deals recently, of course, that will be reflected here. But we do think that this is pretty updated information as far as beginning salaries and then average salaries as it relates to across our districts as well. Both in these districts, which are the largest 10 in the state, and then down here, our Southwest Florida region. And then comparing that to what those funds per FTE are that we just talked about as well. Because one can correlate with the other, if you see what I'm saying. So the district's investment in salaries, and this is just a few year history here. So we just talked about the FEFP and how that funding comes to us, right? So over the past several years in FY22, from one year to the next, the funds per FTE that we get from the state, they're either going to increase or they're going to decrease, right? And so in FY22, the increase that we got in the FEFP from the state, that is our funds per FTE, actually that year decreased by about 1.3%. In that year, the average compensation increase was 5%. So we obviously outperformed the state in terms of what we were trying to invest in the increase of our compensation in that year, specifically for instructional compensation increases, and that's what those numbers are referring to here. In FY23, we did see an FEFP FEFP increase per FTE of about 6.3%. But again, we outperformed the state in terms of what we gave as the increase for instructional salaries at 7.5%. And when I say 7.5%, of course, that was on the average, right? It's not necessarily that everybody got a 7.5%, but that was the equivalent amount of the investment in salary or compensation increases that particular year. In FY24, the state FEFP increase was 4.4%. We again outperformed with the 8% average compensation increase in that year. And I'll follow that with the current year with the 2.9% increase in FEFP, but the average compensation increase for instructional, 5%. So consistently over years, we have outperformed what the state was giving us in terms of a revenue increase in each year, which means that, right, so to put it in plain words, like we spent more than we got, if that makes sense. And the state might have given us an increase of something, X amount, negative 1.3%, in other words, it might have taken something away, 1.3%, or given us some kind of increase that translated to some amount of money, but the amount of money that we put in the compensation increase was really more than we got. So, in, so to speak, a deficit spend as it related to the amount that we got from FEFP. So how does that happen? How do you do that? Because in actuality, we're not the feds. Like every year, the school district has to produce and maintain a balanced budget. So don't get me wrong on that, right? The budget's got to be balanced. We can only spend only what we have, not more than that. So how does that work if we're outspending what the state gives us, but yet we're still balanced? And where then that comes into play is really, it's an estimated fund balance, right? Or the reserve, or the savings account, right? To kind of put it into perspective that the district has, that's what makes up the slack or the difference if we're projecting to spend more than maybe what we were receiving from the state. It's fund balance that takes up the slack for that. So maybe we'll go into a conversation about fund balance if we can, because I know we talked a little bit about that in here before. Like, what's up with the districts or reserves? Like, I'll use some of the different words you might have used it referred to. Fund balance is one way that people refer to it. Or reserves is another term that people use to refer to it. Those funds that we have left over that are in any given year from year to year, we have an amount of revenue, we don't necessarily spend it all, so there's an amount left over, and that is the district's fund balance as it rolls from year to year. So there has been some conversation about, well, let's talk about the district's fund balance or reserve. Is it too high? How do you anticipate what it should be or what it shouldn't be? How do you roll with that? So let's just go into a little bit of detail about that if we can. Because that's what takes up the slack when we do this, right? So this is just a picture of the district's fund balance in any given year, right? I'm going from just FY19 up to FY24, which was last year, as of June 30th, 2024. So the fund balance, the total of the fund balance, and this is general fund only, so I'm talking general fund still, is this total that you see on this line that says total. From $120 million to $189 million here. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for just a second. That was the total. So the fund balance is made up of 4 different parts and pieces that we have to break down and report to the state. And so you see this reporting on any of the things that we give to the state. It's made up of these four parts, what they call non-spendable, restricted, assigned, or unassigned. So those are the 4 parts that we will report to the state. And then, so you see the increase or decrease of such throughout each of the different years. And then this is our, down here is what we call our financial condition ratio. This is, what you'll commonly refer to when people say there's a minimum reserve that the district has to keep, and sometimes you'll hear people refer to a 3% number. So they'll say there's a 3%, there is by statute a 3% minimum number that the district must keep. So it's like 3% of what, right? So when they say 3%, they're really referring to this financial condition ratio. That financial condition ratio takes your assigned and unassigned fund balance, and only those two, assigned and unassigned, because restricted and non-spendable, just as it sounds, it's like they're saying that is not available to you. So your assigned and your unassigned fund balance, how does that compare to your revenues in any given year? And you must be at least 3% in order for the state to say you are managing your funds sufficiently, right? You won't go bankrupt, we'll take that as a minimum for you. So that's the 3% that you hear people refer to when you hear 3% referred to. Our financial condition ratio, as you look across the way, has been this, right? Anywhere from 11.5% to 14%. And then you see the statewide average also here below. So the statewide average you see here. So the 3% is a number, and it's a statutory number, yes. But you will never see, or you will hopefully never see, most districts dip to 3%. You see what the statewide average is, because even 3%, even though that's a statutory requirement, based on the different parts and pieces that it takes to run a budget, especially one of this size for our size district, 3% still puts you in a very precarious situation. You can see by where people sit on the statewide average, that's about what it is. For the, there's other guidance as well, like through the GFOA, or the Government Finance Officers Association. The Governor's Finance Officers Association actually gives different guidance. They say 2 months worth of revenues you should keep in your assigned and unassigned reserve. If we kept 2 months worth of revenue, we'd be higher than this. So we typically don't go higher. I see them, I was just finishing my statement. So we typically won't go to the 2 months worth of revenue. However, the board does desire, or at least the board, as it has kind of made its intention known up to this point, desires a double-digit financial condition, meaning 10%. Kevin D.
Yes, ma'am. So when you look at the difference, the increase, decrease, that is real money every year. So in FY20, it was 20 million. And then in FY21, it was an additional 23 million on top of that 20 million, correct?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I understood your question.
In FY20, there's $20 million left over.
Correct.
And in FY21, there's $23 million left over. Is that $43 million or is that $23 million?
It's 23.
So really the difference is $3 million.
Well, no, it's 23. The
So
difference,
it's really
the difference in
40.
the increase was
So in
from
those
140 to
right.
164.
So in those 2 years, $43 million was left over, right?
I guess if you go from 120 to 164,
Okay,
if you're taking a 2-year look, you're going from 120 to 164.
right.
Yeah? Okay, if I'm answering your question.
Right, so now
Okay.
there's a total of 200, now there's a total of 240, let's call it $243 million between friends. $243 million that has accumulated because of overspending and over budgeting and underspending, essentially, because that's what it is, right?
No. Oh, no.
Well,
When you say underspending, there's different things that lead to this. Like, for example, some of the things, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. Finish your question.
Practically speaking, in my house, right, and I have a business at the house, it's the kitchen table business. Any difference I see that leads to more money in my pocket is because I did not spend as much as I budgeted for. No matter what the reason. At the end of the day, it's over budgeting, not necessarily over budgeting, but not spending up the budget. I'll say not spending up the budget is what I'll say.
Okay, yes, and that I'll agree with, because you say not spending up to budget, because at your particular kitchen table, if you know, oh, well, I budgeted for this particular thing, but the bill didn't come in yet, but you know the bill's gonna come in 6 months from now or 4 months from now, you still need to hold your set aside.
Right.
Or it could be that something that you intended to happen didn't happen, so therefore, okay, that's money that you have in your pocket. So if I'm gonna equate it to the kitchen table business, there would be all of those things that are happening, but yes, so something didn't get spent that maybe,
Was
Yes.
budgeted for.
yeah, correct.
Okay.
Either yet,
Or at all.
or at all, one or the other.
Okay, thanks.
That helpful? So, so at any rate, there is, these are just the numbers as they spread out. And as we are compared to the district average, for the past couple years, we have been driving up a little bit for the last couple years. There was a plan in place, so as we talked about when we're outperforming what the state is giving us and putting that into salaries and also to different things, because salaries was just one piece of the pie and puzzle. Every year, when everything comes up and all funds are driving up, when you're talking about the amount of money that we spent in, that we spend in all different types of categories, whether it be gas, whether it be electric bills, whether it be, supplies across the district, whether it be software, whatever the case may be, all of those things are inflationary as well, right? But there was a plan in place, and we had a plan in place to basically spend down our fund balance to that 10% level that we just discussed that the board had. So in FY19, which was just, that's where I started the picture, and if I had started a little bit before, you would have seen it coming down, up to FY19. So you see in FY19, there was a negative here, and we were almost to the 10%. And then in FY20, again, all types of chaos broke loose during that year, right? And so the years ensuing then led to a lot of different things that lead to this number driving up. So ESSER entering into the picture, a lot higher vacancies entering into the picture than what we would have previously had in the past. All of those things now are entering into the picture, which are driving us up some. But then, if I could go back to these investments that we've made here in FY24 and in FY25, which were close to double what the state was giving us, you see now the number starting to edge down. And as we follow years, right, through FY25 and beyond, we plan that that number will edge down as well to get back to our 10% that we discussed as what the board desire for the level is. So there were a lot of things that happened within this period of time that resulted in this number edging up, but now you see it will start trending down based on what expenditures have been over the past several and what we anticipate them to be moving forward. Ron, did you have a question?
Just to point out again, because you look at that number of 242 million, but yet your unassigned and assigned is still only 150 million, but it kind of makes that look a little bit different because of the restricted funds that have increased, almost doubled the amount of restricted funds, which drives up that number of 242.9.
I saw Sarah's hand.
Oh, was that, oh, Sarah.
Sarah.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide additional information about the fiscal year 24 ending unassigned fund balance. Thank you, Ron, for pointing out unassigned and assigned, because those are the two areas we pay the most attention to. And as Kevin referenced, there are, we did not expend funds as planned is definitely a contributor to that. And another contributor is some non-recurring revenue sources. When we think about the interest income that we've been earning over the last couple of years, we went from fiscal year 22 of earning about $1.7 million in interest income to last year earning over $27 million. And that's just due to the inflationary interest rates, right? So we've got to keep in mind when those things come back down, we'll be losing revenue in those areas. ESSER was also a contributor. Whenever we have a grant, we get what's called indirect cost revenue into the general fund. And that's kind of just like a general administrative fee that we charge to the grants for overseeing like HR paperwork, payroll, procurement, dispatching POs, that type of things. And we were earning a couple of $1 million per year in ESSER indirect into the general fund. So I just wanted to point out some two big non-recurring revenue sources that were driving up the unassigned fund balance. And then specifically for restricted, because that is the one that grew the most from 23 to 24, that is primarily due to Hurricane Ian. We've been fortunate to receive a lot of cash flow into the Hurricane Ian fund from the state. And so we kind of have just a large pot of cash sitting there as we're expending those funds out to complete all the hurricane repairs and rebuild some of our schools.
Kevin, did you have a question?
Thank you, Sarah.
It was about the restricted and that, just kind of what goes into it, but that answers some of it.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So let's talk about next year, FY26, and what that looks like. So right now, as we all know, we're in the middle of the legislative process, which comes in a few parts and pieces. The first part is the governor's budget request, which we have received, and I'll just share with everybody right now. So the governor's budget request is just the first part of the whole process. So the governor says, this is what I would love to see in a budget, but then after that, the legislature has to do their work, the House submits a budget, the Senate submits a budget, and then everybody works together, and then we finally come out with what the final budget is gonna be at the end. So in the governor's budget request, which I will share right here, so this should look familiar, because this looks very much like the FEFP allocation that we just went through. This is the current year 2025, and this is the governor's budget proposal. So the bottom line of this is overall, the governor's budget proposal, and I'm going to tell you historically, the governor's budget is usually the high mark of any budget that we're going to see out of the state once it gets done. So the governor is going to say something in his budget request, whatever we get typically is something less than that. So the governor's budget came up with total funding for the Lee County School District, an increase of funding of about $34.9 million, which is about a 1.4% increase over this current year's. And that $35 million, I'll round it to 35, that $35 million increase really is supposed to encompass an additional almost 1,100 students that they're projecting us to receive for next year. So in context, that's not a lot. $35 million total that they're saying that we should receive additional in the governor's budget request next school year, or 1.7% per FTE increase. So I mean, we're certainly, grateful for any increase that we get, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot. And then the first Senate run, just the Senate, was also recently released. I don't have the breakdown here for you, but just to compare it to that $35 million increase that the governor's budget was giving Lee County, the Senate run gave us a $12 million increase. So a 0.3% increase, not 3, but 0.3% increase. Now the legislative process is still ongoing. We'll see, what happens with that. But this is the conversation that's going on right now. So we can probably imagine that by the time the conversation is over with, these are the numbers that we're probably going to be working with when we're talking about next year's budget. So we're talking about something possibly between 0 and 1.5% increase, which they're projecting us to receive 1,000 more students. So you can see kind of what that outlook looks like in terms of the funding that we'll be getting from the state for next year. So let's compare that to then instructional salaries, because there's got to be something that we got to make it relative. There's got to be some context that's put to that. What really do these numbers mean, right? So the annual salary cost of instructional staff, and that is with benefits, and when I say benefits, I'm talking retirement, social security, Medicare, it's $430 million for instructional staff. So therefore, if you're talking about the cost of a 1% increase, and this is TALC only, right? We have other employee groups, of course, another bargaining group, as you know. The cost of 1% increase, just to put it into perspective as we're talking about numbers, is $4.3 million then in this year. So that just brings us to, right, in order to, hopefully that was helpful in terms of providing a little bit more context on the numbers that we work with and that we could expect to see for next year through FY26. There's a lot of work still to be left at the legislative level. So if we wake up one morning and we have an awesome surprise about one of the things that happened in terms of the increase that we're getting, we all can celebrate together. But based on the indications that we're getting, I'm just giving you what we have so far. And so then our next steps, I think as we see it, are to find out what other information do we need to see and or understand. And I'm talking about, you know, all of us, not necessarily just the people at this table, but what you are believing that maybe people who are watching or reading also need to see and understand and would really love the perspectives in the room on that. And then also, you know, how can we work together to facilitate our compensation conversation? What information do we feel like we need to pull together to share with the board? And we're just looking for that additional engagement around the budget. So as we move into the next steps of our bargaining cycle, hopefully we are in a very collaborative process as we do so. So I will stop right there and ask if there are any more questions or comments or things that we believe that we need to follow up on in the future.
All right, thank you, Amy. Oh,
Yes.
Kevin?
So,
And
yeah,
Shay?
if you're gonna go, so I guess for me, because this is gonna be a new process, right? You're not coming to us with, we've got $10 million and we argue and fight over 7.
Right, sir.
So I guess for me, I think it's important that we list out kind of the things I think we all want to have done.
Okay.
And I'll start there with, I believe the board, because many board members last time had an interest in increasing base salary. So I think it's important for everybody at the table to know, what's that? Starting salary. I think it's important for everybody at the table to know that the days of just giving that money to starting salary are over, and whatever dollar we give to starting salary will be expected to push through the entire bargaining unit. So I don't know what the cost per $1,000 is. Is it 4.3, right, or something?
Is that an information request you're asking?
Well, I'm just making a list of things we think we want to pay for.
Okay.
Okay? So there's been an interest in increasing starting pay. But that has to be passed on through everybody, and in fact, some of the legislation that's out there, if it passes, calls for compression to be addressed statutorily with some of the money. So there's that. What else is there? There was at some point an interest in maybe a longer workday for teachers, and the expense related to that for everybody. I personally would like to see the district give everybody that is in the town bargaining unit the money for supplies. You know, there's a certain portion of the employees that aren't defined as instructional, like counselors and things like that don't get, I think it's $250.
So you are referring to what's called the teacher supply,
Yes.
the classroom supply
Yep.
money.
Yep.
Some teachers get that. You're saying that you would want all teachers to receive
And
it.
not only do I want all teachers to receive it, but I want everybody re-upped in January, because you're finding an excellent way to not spend all the money in supplies every day. I think we can grab that from there.
So, may I make a point about something you're just saying? I just want everybody to see that. So I'm going back to, the FEFP calculation. There used to be a line item, so just as you see all these other line items like for transportation or DJJ, there used to be a line item for like teacher classroom supply. And that line item was specifically for just that. We had to take those teachers as was defined in statute and then give them an amount of money, which this year actually I think was $300 per teacher. But that went away last year, but they just buried it in the base and said, you still have to do that, but you just gotta take it out of this base student allocation. So, just a point of information.
Yeah, I knew it was rolled in, but
Yeah.
again, I mean,
It's just a point of information, I'm sorry, you can go,
That's- no,
please,
that's
please
cool.
keep going.
and then I think we'd like to maybe talk about the schools that get the $4,000 special center, maybe expanding that a little bit. What else? Oh, yeah, we talked about.
When you say expanding that a little bit, what do you mean by
By
that?
increasing the number of schools that get that,
Okay,
beyond the ones that were previously listed.
okay,
The supplement committee is doing some work on that too, but we'll express that, not the money part, but the, where they are.
right,
The soon-to-be renamed turnaround committee is probably gonna want a heck of a lot of money. And then there's supplements that, we probably wanna put a reasonable amount of money towards. So again, and I feel bad as the union president saying this, but a lot of people are writing big checks. And in my recollection, the best amount we've ever been able to come up with, and then there's a raise on top of that, and then there's the money Dr. Carlin, I would assume on top of all the raises, would like to donate to the cause because she wants it to be the number one priority, is teacher pay. So I just, when we make these plans, and that's just thinking right here. When we make these plans, I think it's important to understand that the best the district has come at, in my recollection, is $30 million. And so raises are normally 24, and then we want maybe the extra half an hour, maybe this, maybe that, starting salary, supplements, and turnaround. So as we build this plan together, I just want everybody to realize that when we go before the board, it will be for an astronomical amount of money. Go ahead, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And I just think, and again, I want to talk about the 5% that departments were asked to cut. And then the 15.9 that was found, 5% across the board does not equate to 15.9, so is that 5% an additional to the 15.9 that was found? So just, as we build this thing to go to the board with together as the bargaining committees, we are going to be asking for a lot of money. And I want to have that out there. Is that for me or can I pass it to Hannah?
Amy, were you gonna respond to
Okay,
that?
I'll take it, Walker. Go ahead, Amy.
All
Sorry.
Jay was next, and then Anna.
so I was, you said you wanted to put that out there, so I'll put that out there too. I thought that our charge as a bargaining committee was to take things forward that, based on all of our information, that we felt that we could do, right? That we, of course, we agree as a bargaining committee on our interests, we agree on, what we're trying to accomplish, but that the information or the options that then we're bringing forward that ultimately we in this room would agree to would be things that we know we can accomplish.
But I also think we have a priority to list it out, because I don't want there to be another circumstance where we don't move starting salary, and the board members seem to act like it's my fault. That they gave me $10 million less than they did the year before, and I couldn't do anything with starting salary. So I think we need to build a plan, and ask for the plan, and make them say no to $70 million.
Well, and I will just respond to that in that I believe that our charge as a bargaining committee certainly is to list all the things out to build a plan, but as we build a plan, it should be a plan that we know we can or should accomplish. It might not be in one fell swoop, it might take parts and pieces, but I believe our charge is to come up with a plan and agree to something that we know we can accomplish and that in fact can be ratified.
Right, but we can't have the global plan until we know what the cost is. I would love to see starting salary at $60,000, but that means everybody's getting that money. And so that may take 3 or 4 years to do, but if we don't put it down on paper, it's all just out there in the nebula. And so when we put it down, we'll have to prioritize and plan, and maybe there is a plan to get to 60 over 2 or 3 years when passing that through.
Understood.
All right, Jay?
So, as I was listening to you taking notes, you did say about 27% comes from the state. So about 27% of the 63%.
No, I think,
Local.
I said a couple of different numbers. If we were talking about just in terms of the FEFP, well, in terms of the general fund itself, then 63% is local and 37% is state. And then I also refer to a number through the FEFP itself. So just looking at the FEFP calculation from the state, down here, there was a split of about 59% local and about 41% state.
Okay, so do we only use the state funds to go towards increases in salary, or does some of those local dollars
No, it's all,
come into that?
it all counts into it.
Okay, so then, you gave us a number of what we could expect possibly from the state. Is it possible to get an idea of what local monies that would be additional for next year?
Well, that encompasses that whole deal, right? So if I go back here, in the FEFP, ultimately, they give us a total funding amount, right? So this total funding amount. And that total is, it's not 994 million for this year, right? But that total then is made up of some state dollars and some local dollars, but it's all the same, right? So the total for next year that they're projecting to give us right now through the governor's budget or through the state, the legislative budget, the Senate budget, was an increase on that total potential, that increase on the total funding number of either $12 million or $35 million, depending on which version you were looking at, right? So that encompasses all of that. It encompasses any increase in funding we were gonna get through the FEFP, either from the state or from local sources, either way.
Okay, perfect.
So that they're not, it was all together with that.
Okay, Anna?
Can I ask one question before you do that? So in relation to that, so the 1.7% or whatever that might be, so to speak, in the governor's budget, so that would take into account if locally we were able to raise some more dollars through taxes, and that could in turn decrease maybe the amount of funding that comes directly from the state, because it would all be based on a 1.7% increase. But that could be if property values increase, then the state share may come down a little bit to equal that 1.7, right? Does that make sense?
Okay, Anna?
Can you go back to the question page? Thank you. I think one of the things, like Kevin had listed out, kind of like our wish list items of stuff that we need to do, and I think that, we all agree these are things that we would love to do. I think something that we need to have, hopefully it's available, is my favorite thing, the Evergreen study. So can you just give us an update on that, where that information is, and when we would be available to use that information? Because I think that would, hopefully, in my mind, was going to give us some guidance on what our priorities are in a district.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, so duly noted, I do have that written down. We are working with some of that information right now, and I think that'll be something that we'll need to discuss as we come up with our list of desires, potentially options, all of those things. So, yes, duly noted.
Follow up, because I'm part of the Evergreen conversations as well. And so I think Evergreen's first task was really, you recall, we looked at, spell, Schedule N and admin, because TALC was always supposed to be part of phase 2 with that. So really the crux of what Evergreen provides for us is what are districts around the state of Florida doing? Is there something in their particular salary schedules that is comparable to, things like that we want to. Not every school has a turnaround supplement. So, from their perspective, how do other school districts account for those types of things so that they may be able to inform us about a potential structure that would include that. So Evergreen at this point is making recommendations about, what our salary structure should look like. The only thing they're really doing and providing for us is really, what are our surrounding districts doing, what is the trend in some of those things. But as far as the actual salary structure, it's kind of based on what a lot about what we were talking about. So
I just know through a lot of conversations that are being held within, with teachers throughout the district. A lot of teachers took time out of their day to make sure that they were being a part of that, they were being interviewed. So I know that that question is out there and the teachers are like, well, where is this information? So just kind of as a piece of information, I do think that that our teachers are kind of looking for some sort of information as like, I don't know if to say like a result of that or like a finding of that, but I just know that there are, it's conversation a lot of teachers are having, what happened to that information.
Oh,
This question, Dr. Desmore, just for me to wrap my head around in terms of scale, let's just say hypothetically speaking, you increase all TALC employees, let's just say 1%. What type of dollar amount would that be the impact for just 1%? Just so we can wrap our heads around it.
Yes, sir, 4.3 million.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Kevin?
Yeah. I talk too much.
Tina?
I'm not sure what it is.
So as a follow-up, if TALC and admin were part of phase one and TALC is part of phase two, when is phase two occurring and when should we expect the results?
Well, now, phase two is occurring now in different ways and in parts and pieces, but I would imagine that some of the options that we may discuss as we go along in this bargaining session would include incorporation of some of that information.
Correct.
Maybe I can clear up some of the questions here. I think folks are expecting at some point a presentation to be given to the board from Evergreen, kind of in the same vein that I believe they did for SPALC. And I guess what's being asked is, should we expect Evergreen to say teachers are underpaid? Or should we expect them to say, these are the categories in which, you should focus, like, what does that report look like, if at all?
Okay, good. So, I guess the thought process is we can follow up with some information from that in a, I'll call it an evergreen presentation, but I don't know necessarily who's gonna give it, but we can follow up with the information.
Let me just kind of clarify, because there's a big difference really with what we're doing with our teacher salary schedule and how that's structured, that is a little bit different than Schedule N, SPALC, and our admin. So phase one of the Evergreen study was actually determining pay grades and then where job descriptions fit within those pay grades. So unbargained positions range from U01 all the way up to U26. And so, what job descriptions fall within those pay grades? SPALC, I think, is SO1 to SO14 or 15. Again, part of that work in phase one was, okay, we have to take every single job description, figure out where it fits in the pay grade. That was phase one, developing pay grades with a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. Phase two then, for those three areas is, okay, we have the pay grades, how do we determine where someone fits within the pay grade. So that's the differentiation piece that exists within the pay grades. And so that's part of phase two. But I can tell you that that is very much driven by the district and with feedback from Evergreen. Because we have unique job descriptions, they have unique skill sets that go along with them, so we have to figure out what that is. So I know that, like, for example, the compensation department right now is engaged in the work of what we call job leveling. So within those pay grades, you know, is there a coordinator, maybe I'm using the admin salary schedule. So coordinator one may be different than coordinator two based on the amount of people that they supervise, or the risk levels and the impact, whatever that they have on that. So that's all part of phase two. And again, to separate out TALC is really, okay, do we want to structure, again, that is based on pay grades? You know, and some districts have. Orange County, I believe, has a couple different pay grades, and it's based on maybe some educational attainment and things like that. So they provide us what other districts are doing. It's still not a lot of recommendations because they're bargain positions with the TALC. I don't know if that clarifies where we're at, but that's what I've been hearing from Evergreen.
So we should not expect like a presentation to the board in some of the manner that was done for the spout unit with results and given by this
I mean,
phase.
I think we can. I think it's all going down to, you know, what we determine here is part of that. Some of those options that they're working on for us is, what do those options look like and how do we present them? Which you're gonna know probably, hopefully, April 22nd. You know what I mean, what some of those options may be.
Anna?
I just want to thank you for clarifying that, because not once, unless I totally was spaced out, has Evergreen been explained to the bargaining team in that manner. Because in my mind, the impression I got was that we were gonna get this presentation that was gonna say, hey, you know, you need to fix compression for maybe like your year 13 people, or like, it really would have given us more of an insight of kind of where our trouble areas are within what we are bargaining. You know, we all know that everyone is on their own pay scale. There's not, you know, you're not all year 10s are making the same wage. It's really, you know, there's 3,000 different pay scales within our district for our TALC employees. Or maybe they would have said, hey, your special instructional people, they're really out of line here. That in my mind was what, and I'll speak for myself, which I normally don't do, but that in my mind was like what I was waiting for. That it was gonna give us some really reliable data onto where our compensation scale breaks down for our TALC unit versus what you just explained. So it definitely gives me a different insight on what I've been waiting for and expecting. And I know if I've been assuming that as a person very involved in things, I would like to say that there are other people that would make that same assumption as me. So I really appreciate that clarity of kind of the different things. That makes a lot of sense to me on why you would want to do those, the min, the mid, the max for those different area groups that are structured differently than our teachers are. So I just want to thank you for providing that information.
Anybody else?
I'll go. I have 1 minute.
Okay.
As you know, I have 1 minute. So I think, I mean, even the rosiest of budget proposals from the governor, and historically speaking, you know, we can see that our savior is not coming from Tallahassee, right? And so, from what I know about the taxation across the state, there are other districts that have come to that conclusion, right? And they have passed locally generated revenue sources. So, and I say this with all the love in my heart, the inability of Lee County to get the money it needs to appropriately fund salaries for employees is really no longer the employee's fault. It just isn't. Collier has a mechanism, Charlotte has a mechanism, Sarasota has a mechanism, Hendry has a mechanism, Miami has a mechanism, Broward has a mechanism. Right, at this point, it's probably 2/3 of the county have a locally sourced mechanism to deal with salary dollars, because for the past 100 years, the state has never given enough money from Tallahassee to do what we need to do. So because we all know this at this table, unfortunately there's one group that is able, I believe, to move the idea. And that's the 7 people that sit on the other side of this building. And the superintendent, the 8 people. So has anybody gotten them in a room and said, hey, I don't care if you like the idea, but we've got to do the idea. Because nobody likes taxation. I'm a little less tax averse than most people, but nobody likes taxation. I Uber all the time. Right? People move from the Midwest, they complain about the taxes. It really wasn't the tax that was the beef. It was the fact that there were still potholes in the road, and the bridge was falling apart, and the tax dollars weren't used effectively. That was the beef on the tax. So at some point, and now, I mean, it won't happen next year, the 28, I believe, is the half penny, and, you know, I'm not saying anything out of school, the superintendent is not convinced to do that. So if that's up in 28 and she doesn't decide to do that, I believe we will have a capital hole we can't fill and we still need to build schools. And then certainly, so now we're looking at 2030, the earliest time before we can advance a referendum to get locally generated dollars for salaries. For everybody, not just us, but for SPOUT, for Schedule N, for administrators, for everybody. So I guess, at some point, don't you lock them in a room and say, hey, nobody's leaving until we figure this out? Because if we continue to rely on Tallahassee, we will continue to get the results we have always gotten. We will fall further behind Charlotte and Collier, and Hendry now, and soon to be Glades. And we will continue to train other people's teachers. I've said this all the time. If I worked in Collier HR, there would be a single teacher from Bonita South with 5 to 10 years of experience that worked for the school district of Lee County. I'd poach every one of them. And I'd do it on the Lee County Schools email address. I'd poach every one of them. They'd come to me for $7, $8, or $9 grand more a year. Come join Team Collier. I mean, the failure of us to do the locally thing, it's no longer the employee's fault. And I don't know how much longer the employee should have the wrath of a board and other people that are unwilling to take the unpopular but necessary political stand to put us on par with other districts. And that doesn't need a response, that's just a black. But, you know, I don't understand.
Okay, Kevin, looks like,
Jump in, Mom.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know. Some of you may recall that about a year ago, I actually expressed a very similar sentiment about what needs to happen in terms of the whole financial piece. And at the time, and one of the things I said, then it has to be we and us. And so, however, you know, one of the things that if it's going to happen, and I remember talking at one of these sessions that, you know, I go back to my grandmother, she said that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. So, and what I'm saying, not as a criticism, but more of an observation is, and I said this, like I said, not a little over a year ago, that how do we work collectively? And I think a lot of it has to do with approach. So, like I myself have had individual conversations with, through the years, last 3 or 4 years, with some of those who sit in those seats. We have to recognize that there are people who ran because we got the half penny sales tax, because there were people who were upset. So I say all that to say this, is that I definitely have said that we have to figure out a way. I said we, this is not an administrator, a teacher, a support. This is all of us, of how to have because it can't be, if it's an attack, we barely got to have penny sales tax before. But if it's viewed as an attack, then someone takes that and makes it political to perhaps forward whatever their agenda is. And I'm sure you remember how hard it was even to do that. And we've all benefited from the capital funding. I think, and even though this is not necessarily part of bargaining per se, but I think that really, how are we gonna have that discourse so that it becomes a think tank, a problem solver? I think that's kind of what you were saying, Kevin, but I also think that it's all about, what I recognize, all about presentation, and presentation, unfortunately, has not necessarily been part of our political landscape over the last 8 years. But because we hold the key that is needed, it's really to the benefit of all. But as we go forward, and this is outside of bargaining, how do we bring folks so that they can have the discourse and the dialogue and really talk about the what I call the non-judgmental conversation when you're talking with the folks who are out there about how can we get something, because I think everybody wants, you hear it, everybody wants, they talk the language, but how do we get there, and how do we, because what one person said to me, that person said, it was the way I didn't understand the why. I heard people complaining, which is why that person initially was against it. Once they sit in those seats, they start having a different perspective. So I would tell you that I think the perspective is there, but it's the messaging that we have to figure out together when it comes down to, because I think everybody wants to have more. And when you look at I agree with you, you said 2/3, that might be conservative with what a lot of counties are doing. And I think that's the messaging. So many counties are raising money, and Lee County being one of them. I think it's almost like, how do we strategize to do it in a non-combative but just informational process? Because like I said, I was stubborn. That's why I wouldn't even stop at a drive-thru in different counties, because I knew in Leon County I wasn't going to buy extra stuff because I was funding them. My wife would tell you I was that stubborn about it. So, but how do we do that? And I think, and I know this is all bargaining, but I think we're all together. We all agree with that, but we haven't figured out how we're going to go forward to get that buy-in and that working collectively, because that is the best way for it to happen.
All right, I had Kurt, then Anna, then Amy.
I have a question, and I have a couple of data requests. I guess one of the data requests that I have is for an updated bargaining unit spreadsheet that we received before. We received pre-bargaining. The bargaining unit's increased since then. Could we get an updated sheet with all the salary information? In years past, I believe we budgeted 23% for the cost of benefits. Is that still about the percentage that we're using for this current year?
The question is, we typically 23%, 21.5%. 21.5%.
So one of my questions, as we're looking at the budget, we typically compare the AFR, the annual financial report from the previous year, to the district summary budget. And I'm curious, in the instruction line item, the 5,000 item, the benefits looks like it's budgeted at around 39%. And I'm curious, does that account for more than FICA Med and things like that? Or why would that amount be so much higher than what we account for here at the table? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I know, no, I appreciate the question. I would have to, I'd have to research and come back and let you know what's in the number, the specific number that you're looking at. Because depending on where you're looking and how you're looking, depending on what exactly you're looking at. So if you could share with me exactly which thing, what page, because it's like, there's different breakdowns, different funds. Is it general, or is it governmental fund, or is it something that includes something else? I just need to know specifically.
Okay, I can share that with you.
Okay.
You know, something else that we typically, one of the things that we typically, wow, I cannot speak today. I'm not feeling too well, so maybe that's part of it. But one of the things we typically look at is instructional salaries and what was budgeted for and what was spent. And just, maybe this is more story. I mean, if you want to comment on it, that's fine. But we noticed that we're budgeting $55.8 million more in instructional salaries for the 24-25 school year than was spent in the 23-24 school year. Part of my big request is the number of unfilled positions, and I know that perhaps some of that accounted for it last year, but Lee County typically budgets more for instructional salaries, than is spent. I think Anna commented on one of the pieces of data that we received in years past. We call it the line chart. I think it was average salary by year of credible teaching experience, because we were able to look at some of the divots and see where folks were adversely affected over the years. That would be nice to have so that we can prepare some of our options. And, I'm sorry?
That's not a report that's generated, it's one that has to be
We created, yeah.
recreated, so that will take.
Yeah, that's fine. And the presentation from this evening, will that be linked into the minutes as well? Perfect.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
You want to, Kevin, or you want me?
And
And next, and then Amy. And then Ron.
So I guess I have a data request as well, and it has to do with advanced degrees. Just because when you mentioned some of the other school districts that have steps, I kind of started looking, Googling different school district salary schedules. And so my question is, it appears from what I can see, but are there school districts that are paying for advanced degrees that are not tied to the area that we're certified in? Because I believe the way Lee County does, and it does say on our website, it references the state statute. Basically, to be paid for an advanced degree in Lee County, it must be in the individual's area certification and then paid as a salary supplement. And so just kind of looking at some other districts, I didn't see that reference. So if there are other districts within the state that are somehow paying, if you have an advanced degree, I think that information would be helpful.
Rob, do you have an answer to that?
I don't have an answer to her data request.
Right.
Her may be able to get that easier than we can through FEA. But the statute says may. We may pay it for folks outside of their certification area, which is a bargainable issue, frankly.
And Polk had an arbitration a number of years ago where they settled that. Polk's been paying it for years.
Yeah.
The attitude of the district has been that it's persuasive and not binding, so
Right.
we haven't been successful.
So, once again, it's something that, could be bargained here at this table.
Put it on the wish list.
All right, thanks, Rob. Amy?
All right, so this is going back to what Carl was talking about. We know that other districts have been successful in getting a millage passed. Can't we ask them, through TALC or through the district, what they did, how they advertised it, how they presented it to their communities to get that pass, because if they've already done it and they've been successful, we don't need to rebuild anything here, we just need to use the same strategies.
Okay. Ron?
Did you have something to follow up with
Yeah,
that?
I'm gonna follow up.
Okay.
So, I mean, again, so I will say in public what I have said 100 times to every superintendent that has been here since I have been president. I will stand at the podium with you, just like I did on the half penny. Every time I talk about doing it, people tell me I can't do it. It has to be done by the district board, the superintendent. I'm unable. And at some point, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I've asked for this since the day after the millage passed. And when we met with school board members, it was, oh, it's not a good time. That somehow correlated to their reelection year, amazingly. So it was never passed. So to be honest with you, I think it's nice we do a lot more with honey than vinegar, but, you know, I'm here to speak for the employees, or as my kids say, I'm the Lorax for the teachers. We need the money, and we need it as quickly as possible. And I don't have time to be nice anymore. I'm done in 2027, so this is my successor's fight to pick up. But the only people I've been told they can do it are the board and the superintendent. And I will stand with them on the day they say they want to do it. I have made that offer to previous superintendents, and amazingly, nobody has taken me up on it. So again, like we talk about everything else, it's the will. Do they have the will to do something that is politically unpopular but necessary? And if they don't, we're going to continue to fall behind those that do.
Ron?
So as part of our wish list, I just wanted to add here too, because I think it's important. Because you mentioned the increase in the workday and what we talked about in Article 7. Just wanted to say too, we are working on the request for Article 12. So bereavement leave and parental leave also will be added to that wish list in relation to the bargaining authority.
Okay. Anything else? Comments, questions, requests? Heather?
Looks like I forgot to do it.
Okay, well, one thing I wanted to do is invite everybody on the bargaining teams to come to the teacher leadership program.
You'll get an email tomorrow, I promise. I swear.
Yeah, it's been a while, but it is April 26th, 11 o'clock. And we have a lot of our local teacher leaders. They've been doing different research projects. Amy came last year, got to see a lot of different things. Please come. We had one of our teacher leaders actually was looking at millage and how other counties did it. And most of the counties in Florida that passed it are very conservative. So we should be checking out what they're doing. Because honestly, that's what we do here. We follow what other counties do. So please come. I think you'll see we're here to find solutions, and we want you here to build them with us.
Okay, thanks, Heather.
I appreciate that. I'm assuming that TALC will be sending out some information along that way.
Yeah, I'll be sending out an email tomorrow, I swear. Scouts honor.
And just along the lines of that, if I could add, I mean, we've had plenty of conversations, and you know, the TALC team, leadership team has the opportunity to meet with the superintendent on a monthly basis, and we have all had conversations about collaborative efforts to get the information out. Like we need to really talk to the entire district about the collective bargaining agreement and make sure everybody understands, you know, what we have in there. And so we have many plans to work together on those types of things, and be more than happy to encourage our folks to come to the teacher leadership program, just to hear from them.
Okay, Kevin?
I don't want to open a huge can of worms, but as we look at Article 12, and things that might apply to both bargaining units, do we want to do them together? In like jumbo bargaining session with TALC, SPALC, both bargaining teams, because I think there's an interest in the district and SPALC to also do bereavement and
Okay.
paternity, so I don't know if we want to.
Well, I'm more than happy to.
I just don't want us do it and then
Okay.
SPALC do it separately, and
Okay,
we did that a couple of times with insurance, we just
I'd be
need
more
more
than happy to
tables.
bring that up.
Okay, anything else?
Her would like to Caucus.
Okay, time,
90 minutes.
90 minutes.
I can beat that, so that's
That'll work.
over-promise and, under-promise and overdo it. 15.
15?
Yeah, I bet them.
All right. District meeting caucus.
We'll be back. Just a little break. You probably want to turn it.
We need our caucus report first. TALC, you called the caucus, so we'll take you first.
Yeah, sure. So we discussed the presentation. Thank you again for the presentation. And we discussed some of our, I guess, priorities is maybe the best word. And we look forward to developing some options to bring forward next time and discussing these. But we do have an interest in increasing starting pay, but as Kevin said, it's to better reflect our union values. It's not enough just to increase starting teacher pay. Everybody needs to receive that. And so as we were discussing in our caucus, you know, when there's 5,934 people in the bargaining unit, every $1,000 move is about $7.2 million. So that's the reality of the situation. We'd also like to address compression. So looking at some of maybe the dips in the line graph that we'll see based on years of credible teaching experience will help with that. And lastly, we discussed calendar, and I guess we'd like to talk about the calendar here in the time we have remaining. The next two dates on the schedule are the 22nd of April and May 5th. I have a May 19th date, but in order to get this in front of people, voted on, and ratified by the end of the school year, we really need to be done by May 12th. And so if that involves adding another session, we would rather discuss that here early April than end of April or early May.
Okay. Ron, do you have a caucus report?
We didn't really have a lot to talk about, to be honest with you. Just kind of went back through some of Amy's presentation and some different scenarios that we thought based on the priorities that they gave us. So I really don't have much to report. We only just went there because we all decided to caucus. So, yep.
Get up and walk and.
Yeah.
Rob,
Mine's a calendar question, so I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that.
all right, I think we're ready to do that.
Do we want to set up, do we want to look at some other dates?
Can I ask this question first? Kurt, is May 12th the date that you need to be done by? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I propose something that I propose every year, and it's always met with scorn. It will be met tonight with scorn by new people. Let's do an overnight session. Bring in the mattresses, order some pizza. We're going to the mattress. So overnight, any night. All right?
I don't know, I'm hearing rumors of divorce and all sorts of things.
My wife might be happy
like that. Some may be, others may not be as happy.
Number 3 was locked on the meeting space.
With the indoor water park too? That's good. All right.
For after hours. All right, any other suggestions?
I'll throw this out there. It doesn't have to be an evening. I mean, it could be during the workday if that's amenable to folks. Yes, sir. June and July.
Right, 22nd is our next one, it's a Tuesday.
24th, the 29th, the 30th.
Yes. Houston, Monday.
Yeah, we're off next Friday, so we have Monday night party and we won't.
I mean, I'm assuming after the 22nd, when we start bringing proposals, then we will schedule some dates after that, so. You wanna set the 24th aside?
There's a little bit matters, but there's a career technical education showcase of the district.
Is it in this room? Right.
Joey, checking if the media is open that night? In your room?
Yeah.
Or are you in there too, Brian?
No.
Just here?
24th, 29th?
Yes.
Yes, to vote?
I mean, It's better to have more dates than less.
That's true.
We're adding them tonight.
Anyone opposed to the 24th?
Maybe check to see if we have a room.
We can always do it in the pit again.
Oh, that was that.
I'm not the chief negotiator. We definitely want to schedule May 12th. Oh, wait a minute. No, can't do that,
That's about.
Okay, the 24th, there's not a room available here. No rooms at the end.
We could theoretically do it at our office.
Possibly the intervention room that would be tight though if we had any spectators. The one behind the bus, in the front lobby. Yeah.
So we may not
No,
be
it's
able to,
small.
I heard you say your office?
BAV
We
would
may
be
not be
the
able to
problem.
live stream, but we can record
Yeah.
The only thing that's difficult in our office is caucus space. And so
Yeah.
we have to go outside. Or,
Somebody
or make the spectators go outside or something.
Well, why don't we,
That would be the only downside, but we're always welcome to use our office.
so we have no room on the 24th.
Right, nothing.
Not one room in.
The intervention room.
Ron, in the past, we've looked at maybe using South. That's been just something we floated out in the past, South from Myers High School.
That one's open. HR community.
Community department.
Yeah, that's where we're getting.
Dunbar Middle's down the road, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's true.
Karen, to see if we can just use Dunbar.
Well, let's,
I mean, I think that's a great space.
why don't we schedule the 24th with the location TBD? And we'll figure it out.
Is that okay with everybody on the TALC team? I know I'm not using the mic.
Yeah, we'll schedule the 24th, and then location will determine.
There are plenty of rooms on the 24th and the 29th. I'm sorry, 29th and 30th, sorry.
So let's,
So 29th?
29th here.
yep,
Do you want to hold the rooms for both of those if you can?
yeah.
29th and the 30th?
Anything else?
One overnight session knocks us out. 3 o'clock in the morning, deals get made.
We need our single.
We do.
That's when you guys are buying the, top of the graphic.
I would say let's go 24th and 29th right now, and then we'll determine if we need the 30th, but I'll put a placeholder on the room.
That's fine with me.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to do the HR community room on the 24th? Or we're gonna wait on?
Yeah, we're gonna wait on the 24th, we're scheduling it, but we're definitely locked in the 29th here. And then we'll lock the room in on the 30th, but we're not gonna 100% commit to that yet.
Okay, anything else?
So the two extra sessions we got this time, are 24th.
Yes.
Anybody have anything else? So our next meeting is on Tuesday, the 22nd. And what are we going to do? We're going to have some info,
Yes.
info and options. Rob?
Yeah, I'll have Article 12. It's, what a mess. Oh my gosh. I was reorganizing it again. I understand why it took 4 years to do it.
Yeah, well, like I say, no shade, but only touched by lawyers for the past 15 years. Of course it's a mess.
What do you say?
Only touched by lawyers.
Sure.
Since you brought up Article 12, Mr. Dodig and I had a conversation about this, but we reached out to our legal counsel around terminal pay. And the statute that we were discussing that night, the advice we were given was that it only applies to our colleagues that work for the state university system. So, in FEA world, that just be our UFF colleagues. So, K-12 employees are not held to that statute.
There is no 10-year vetting
No.
in order to be eligible for term.
So if that's in a K-12 contract, it does not need to be there.
Okay, thanks for the information. Anything else? So everybody's gonna work on some options to bring forward next time to answer the questions that Amy posed to us at the end.
Spending a lot of money.
Presentation.
Kurt, you're gonna do, advanced degree data request, which you guys, other districts have for advanced degrees?
Sure.
Okay, I'll get the other one.
Let me write that down so I don't forget.
Just make sure it's the actual question, which is advanced degrees outside of the areas that are certified.
Yeah.
I got it.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else to accomplish this afternoon or this evening, then I guess we can call it a day. And I have a nice mini break over Easter and see you on the 22nd.
Thank you.